Hi boys and girls, so you just finished your quiz on the Pythagorean theorem, and now you need to take some notes on the types of angles because we're going to start talking about angles over the next few days. So here we go. Make sure you have your paper. There are two different papers that you need. Okay, make sure you have two different papers. They look similar, but they're different. So the first one, make sure you see the one that says complementary angles up top. Okay. So you are going to cut this out. We're going to glue it into our notebooks. If you would like to wait to glue it into your notebook until later, that's fine, but make sure you get these notes down. So complementary angles. Complementary angles are two angles whose measures have a sum of 90 degrees. So that means when we take the two angles and we add their angles measures together, we get 90 degrees. So for example here, angles 2 and 3. Again, you can shade these in. I know that shading's not working very well on here, but if you shade them in, get the marker. I'll fix it. There we go. When we shaded those in, angles 2 and 3 here are complementary angles because together they form a right angle. So together those two angles are 90 degrees. All right, next one. Supplementary angles. Supplementary angles are two angles whose measures have a sum of 180 degrees. They also can be called linear, right? Linear pair, because they form a straight line. So if we look at angles 1 and 2 here, see how together they form a perfectly straight line? Okay, so they form a 180 degree angle. Both of them are 90, and what's 90 plus 90? 180. Okay, so supplementary angles can also be called a linear pair, depending on how they're formed. Okay, so they have a sum of 180. Okay, so this is like sometimes, not all the times. All right, vertical angles. It's basically vertical. Vertical's up and down. Okay. And here's a little thing that I have here, vertical angles. So we have vertical angles, and that's what they look like. A pair of opposite angles form when two lines intersect at one point. So there's some different ones here. So the first set that they gave us are 2 and 3. So if we look at 2 and 3 here, okay, 2 and 3, vertical angles. Okay, let me show you another one here. Okay, let's look. We also have 1 and 4. 1 and 4 are vertical angles. Okay, let's look down in this other one here. So we said 1 and 4. That's not what I wanted. Angles 1 and angles 4. Then we can do, over here, we can do angles 6 and angle 7. They're vertical. That was angles 6. Jeez Louise. All right, so those angles 6 and angle 7. And then we also have angles 5 and angle 8 are supplementary. So let's see here. So we've got 5. I said supplementary, I meant vertical. Vertical, vertical. Okay, so they're across from each other and they form that V and that A like I did over here. Okay, that VA, again, I'll redraw that a little bit bigger. So VA. And then these two angles here and here are vertical angles. All right. Next, we have adjacent angles. Adjacent angles are two angles that have a common side and a common vertex. So, for example, angles 3 and 4. Okay, this is also kind of like linear. I will figure out what I'm doing eventually. So these are linear. Together, they equal 180 degrees. Okay? Sometimes, well, these two equal 180. They don't always equal 180, so maybe we don't want to write that. But adjacent angles, they have a common side and a common vertex. Okay, so here's 3 and 4. We could also say 1 and 2. Oh, goodness. 1 and 2. We could say 7 and 8. We could say 5 and 6. Then you could also say, I get a different color here, we could also say 1 and 3. Or we could say 2 and 4. Or we could say, let's see here, and here, right? We could do 5 and 7, or we could do 6 and 8. So the two angles that are right next to each other that have a common side and a common vertex, they're called adjacent angles. All right, let's go to your next paper now. All right, so all of that vocabulary that we just talked about, you probably have learned before. You've heard about it. I'm sure most of you forgot it. That's okay, but you probably should have heard it before. Some of what we're about to see now might be brand new to you. So a transversal line, I know that's kind of a weird word, but transversal line is a line that intersects two or more lines at different points, okay? And I'm going to say here it's usually intersecting parallel lines. And remember, parallel lines never touch. The parallel lines never touch. So over here, our transversal is this line right here. See how it says T? So that transversal is here, it's line T, and our parallel lines are lines A and B. Okay, so the transversal T is intersecting parallel lines A and B. Corresponding angles. So two angles that occupy corresponding positions when a transversal intersects two lines. So corresponding positions, and I'm going to go over this some more. This is usually confusing for some students. And I will explain more in detail tomorrow. So corresponding positions, more or less, that means the same position. Okay, so for example, if I were to cut this in half here, and I were to take this section here, and I were to drag that down so it's on top of that one, which angles would match up? Okay, that's what we're talking about here. So let me erase all this. I'm going to go through all the different corresponding angles. So what's going to match up? Well, angles 1, I haven't caught on yet. Angles 1 and angle 5 are going to match up. Okay, angles 3 and angle 7 are going to match up. Some different colors. Angles 2 and angle 6 will match. And then it's green. Angles 4 and angles 8 will match. So if you want to go ahead and write all of these down here, so that was angles 1 and angle 5. We had angle 3 and 7, angles 2 and angle 6, and then angles 4 and angle 8. Okay, they're corresponding. They're in the same position, same location if we were to cut it in half and put one on top of the other. All right, and then alternate interior angles. That's basically what it sounds like. When a transversal intersects two lines, two angles that lie inside the two lines on opposite sides of the transversal. So 4 and 5 are alternate interior. Okay, so if we look here, this whole section here, inside the parallel lines is going to be this part here. These are all inside the parallel lines. So then 4 and 5 are alternate interior because they're on opposite sides of that transversal. Likewise, 3 and 6 are also alternate interior. Those angles 3 and angle 6 are also alternate interior because they're inside the parallel lines on opposite sides of the transversal. So then finally, alternate exterior angles. When a transversal intersects two lines, two angles that lie outside the two lines on opposite sides of the transversal. So outside means we're going to have this section, this section over here and this section over here. Those are outside the parallel lines. So we have 1 and 8. They're on opposite sides of that transversal. And then we have 2 and we have 7. Okay, so angles 2 and angle 7 are also alternate exterior. So on outside the parallel lines on opposite sides of the transversal. Okay? All right, let's do some quick practice in identifying the types of angles. You can write this down. I'll go over it tomorrow. So first we're going to shade all the 2's and the 4's. Okay, and you want to identify what type these 2's and the 4's are here. So all of these orange 2's and 4's, look back at your notes. What type of angles are they? Okay, and then in green here, we're going to do all the 2's and the 5's. So 2 and 5. Identify what these types of angles are. 2 and 5. Sometimes we did not have 12 different kinds of types of angles, so some of these will be repeated. And then over here, we have 1 and 4, and you're going to identify what types these are. So 1 and 4, 1 and 4, 1 and 4, 1 and 4. So go ahead and write down the types of angle relationships we have there, and I'll see you tomorrow.